We are back, January 2017, HSB Part 2, where we are covering questions 4 to 6. So let's get into it. Question 4. Some nerves are considered sensory and others motor. Distinguish between the following terms. Now, this entire question is worth what? 4 marks. So, 2 marks for nerves and neurons, 2 marks for sensory and motor neurons. So, nerves and neurons. Nerves are bundles of nerve cells, neurons are nerve cells. That's the crux of it. Yeah. 1 mark each. Sensory and motor neurons. Sensory neurons, they will carry signals to the brain and spinal cord from sensoreceptors such as photoreceptors, and your motor neurons are going to carry signals from the brain or spinal cord to various effectors such as the muscles. Right? Other effectors will be like your salivary gland, not salivary, your sweat glands, and so on. And yeah, your salivary glands as well. Yeah. So all of this, they are very much connected to each other. And that's your 4 marks. Part 2, identify the term used to describe the area where 2 neurons meet and the chemical used to convey an electrical signal from one cell to the other. And there we go. Area where 2 neurons meet, that's your synapse. And the chemical is the neurotransmitter. Right? Part B. Maria reaches out to pick a beautiful rose. Her thumb is pricked by a thorn and she instantly releases the plant. Suggest the type of reflex action, spinal or cranial, and outline the steps. So you're being told yes. We know it's a reflex, what type of reflex, and outline the steps of it. And notice 4 steps. So you have to describe it in 4 steps. Type of reflex, that's your spinal reflex action, right? So it's not going to go all the way to your brain and then come back down. It's just going to interact with your spinal cord. And the steps, 1 mark for each step. So first step, the pain receptors in your thumb stimulated. That's going to initiate a signal in your connected sensory neuron, right? There's a neuron connected to that. That initiates a signal. That signal is transferred from sensory to relay neuron in the spinal cord, and that is then transferred via diffusion, okay, of neurotransmitters. Because remember, between the 2 neurons, you'll have that same thing we mentioned, which is the synapse, right? And therefore, you're going to have diffusion of neurotransmitters is going to effectively transfer that signal, right? Then the signal is transferred from relay to motor neuron, also across a synapse via transmitters. And then the motor neuron is going to send a signal to muscles in her arm, and that's going to cause them to quickly contract, pull her arm away from the thorn. Yeah? And that's your process, right? Your 4 steps of your reflex action. So let's go to the next part. Unlike the nervous system, the endocrine system uses hormones to coordinate actions. So Maria's period has ended and she's being asked to name pituitary hormones. Note, pituitary hormones that will be released in the next 16 days and explain the function of each. So we have the 2. One is the luteinizing hormone, the other is sometimes known as LH. And then you have the follicle stimulating hormone, known as FSH. Luteinizing is going to stimulate ovulation, and that is what causes the mature egg cell to be released from the ovaries. Then you have the follicle stimulating hormone that's going to stimulate maturation of the follicle, right, inside of the ovaries. Okay. So this one will actually come out first and then this one. Then we have, and that's it for question 4. Question 4 was very simple, essentially, very straightforward. And we have question 5. So these are the longer questions now. So being asked in this part, just to give, yeah, that's all, answer all the questions. But these tend to be more essay-like, meaning you have to write a few paragraphs here and there, okay? So part A, state 2 cardiovascular diseases that occur as a result of poor diet and explain how these diseases develop. So we have hypertension, coronary heart disease. Yeah, those are the two. And then you're going to show how poor diet leads to these diseases developing. And this will be worth 6 marks. So 2 marks for the 2 diseases, and the rest will be 4 marks. So you have your unbalanced diet that can lead to fatty plaque buildup, and that narrows the blood vessels, hardening of arteries, etc. You can also mention you can have excess fat, excess lipids, excess cholesterol. All right, that's going to lead to that fatty plaque buildup, and that would of course contribute to hardening of the arteries. And high salt water retention, so that's going to connect directly to the hypertension. That's going to increase blood volume and pressure. Poor diet leads to overweight, increase the risk of developing these other diseases by putting pressure, right? These here, this could be either or. So you can either talk about plaque buildup or you can talk about high water retention. So this here would be, this would be also 2 marks, 1 mark here and 1 mark here, right? So all of that would, you can use in your answer. And as you see, whenever I proceed further details, I have a model answers book covering 2017 to 2022, 23. Well, the first edition covers up to 21, so you have about 10 papers covered, including this one. And it is available. If you are interested, you can check the description below. Oh, in fact, let me show you what that looks like in the book itself. Right, so this is the answer. So notice the answer is giving you several options. You have some of the answers with respect to hypertension. So you have details with respect to hypertension, and then you have details with respect to coronary heart disease / atherosclerosis. Yeah. So it outlines it gives you a good enough detail. So it's more than just answering the question. It's almost basically a study course. You're studying the subject right there, right? So there you go. That's what the book looks like. Yeah. So again, if you're interested in getting your own copy, you can check the description below. And we are moving on to the next question. Peter is obese and has developed type 2 diabetes. His doctor says that even though his body is producing insulin, insulin receptors are resistant to insulin. All right, so that's type 2. So just 2 signs that he may be experiencing and 2 ways to manage. So signs and symptoms, These would be the signs and symptoms: urination, thirsty, glucose, etc. Any two of those would apply. Then we have how to manage, right? Low carb, increase, avoid smoking, avoid alcohol, insulin injections if prescribed. If you get to that point where you really need to take insulin injections, then. But the idea is to avoid getting to that point, right? And then we have a nice little table. So let's see what's going on here. Table 4 is showing the percentage of persons within 3 age groups that are who smoke and are obese. Smoking and obesity both increase the risk of heart attacks. Right? So let's see. So it's an interesting outline. We have the age groups on the side. So this would be your x-axis if we were to draw a graph. And these would be the y-axis if you were to draw a graph. And I hope by now, especially if you've listened to part 1, you'd understand why this lends itself to a bar chart if you're asked to draw a graph. All right. So let's see. We have 3 age groups: 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44. All right. And we're being told that 9.1 of this age group smokes and 28.4 of this age group is obese. And so on. So let's look at as usual, we check for our trends. Well, not trends, but maximum, minimum, etc. In this case, we're looking at maximum. So for smokers across the board, across the age groups, 35 to 44 is the max, right? Across. And for obesity, the maximum will also be 35 to 44 max, right? Notice that for all age groups, obesity has a higher percentage, right? So we basically have it. Yeah, not much else you can extract from this. So now we're asked, study the information in table 4. Already done. And identify the age group that has the greatest risk for developing a heart attack. Now remember, smoking and obesity increase the risk of heart attacks. So you're looking for an age group that shows the highest percentage of smoking and the highest percentage of obesity. And we basically covered it, right? It's 35 to 44 because we're seeing the maximum for both. So therefore, yeah, age group with greatest risk is 35 to 44. Notice for this one, you have to do some writing and you're given a lot of space. So these are the kinds of questions that you want to write in complete sentences, treat it like a very small essay, a very, a short essay. Yeah? So let's go through it because we're asked to identify the age group and we're also asked to discuss how smoking can increase the risk of a heart attack. So let's see how we're going about that. All right, so the first thing is we the word discuss is equivalent to that whole explain. It's similar to explain. So again, just like for explain, the term explain, your answer should include also a description, a definition, list, a statement, whichever one is appropriate, right? So since we're talking about increasing the risk of heart attack, a good starting point would be to define what is a heart attack and when and how does it happen, right? So firstly, we indicate, okay, a heart attack occurs when one or more of the coronary arteries gets blocked. Part of the heart that's supplied by the blocked coronary artery dies and reduces heart function. That's one way you can describe and define what a heart attack is and when it happens. Yeah. So now you're getting one of the marks there, right? So 1 mark down, 3 to go. Yeah. Then we talk about the impact, right? How does it increase the risk of heart attack? So we give a little summary statement, right? It increases risk of heart attack by increasing the chances of developing atherosclerosis, that is plaque buildup in the arteries. And it increases risk in these other ways, right? So it can damage your blood vessel walls, make the walls less stretchy. It contributes to inflammation, increases plaque buildup, and lowering cholesterol, etc. That is also going to lead to plaque buildup. All right. Okay, so this is like a little summary that just outlines everything, but then you can go into details here. So this would be like 1 mark here, and then any two of these, 1 mark each. And that's your 4 marks. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then 5. We covered all 5? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's how you would approach it. So let's go to our last question, talking about environmental health and so on. The accumulation of garbage poses a major threat to the environment. So basically, we're dealing with some land pollution. All right. Governments are having challenges finding ways to reduce the amount of garbage created. Landfills are currently being used. All right. So state one advantage and two disadvantages associated with landfills. Now, when they say landfills, we're talking about your sanitary landfills, not a dump. All right, so a sanitary landfill. So again, it's more sanitary, less pests, leaching, and bad smells as compared to a typical dump, right? And disadvantages, it takes up a lot of land space, which if you're in a small Caribbean island, that's a problem, right? You don't have a whole lot of land space to spare. So if it's using up a lot of land space, that's land space you can't use for anything else. Agriculture, housing, you name it, right? And it requires dedicated resources and staff to maintain. Because for it to be a sanitary landfill, it requires input, it requires work, right? Monitoring, moving the garbage around, compacting them, etc. Whereas with a dump, somebody goes up to the dump, dumps, and then walks away, right? So this one takes a little more work. Yeah. Then we have three differences between. So any three of the following. I have about 4 here, right? And again, this is your comparison question. So when you're comparing, you always compare the same features together, and you always mention the two things that you're comparing in each comparison statement. All right? And it's not like you're lacking for space, you have plenty space, right? So I gave about 4 here you can choose from. Of course, what I'm giving is a summarized version, and you can always expatiate, right? So a dump tends to be unregulated, whereas a landfill is planned and managed, right? By some kind of, usually a government body, in the Caribbean in particular. A dump tends to be smaller than a landfill, so it goes back to that whole aspect of taking up a lot of land space, right? And it tends to have a shorter land lifespan, right? Because it's not used in an organized way. You just go and bloop, drop stuff on it, right? Drop garbage in the area. And also, dump doesn't have liners, it doesn't have other safety mechanisms, so it has greater environmental impact, right? So landfill is planned out, it has liners, it has methane release valves. So it is safer and less environmentally harmful. All right? So those are some of the differences you can talk about. Let's go to the next part. Name and explain 3 measures which could be used to control the volume of solid waste. Well, you know you have your 3 R's, right? Right? You have your 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Right? To reduce the quantity of solid waste produced. All right? So notice name and explain. So this is a good point to expand a little bit, give an example, etc. So you're reducing the quantity by doing things like using cloth and canvas bags instead of plastic bags. Then you're going to reuse the items such as plastic containers, glass jars. All right? Then you're going to recycle. You're coordinating to collect recyclable materials, etc., and have them processed, whether in the country or out another country. You export to another country. Right? And those are your measures to control solid waste. And that's your 6 marks, 2 marks each. And that's your answer. And that's the end of the test. Yeah. So see you in the next video where I'll be covering January 2018 and so on. All right. Take care until the next video.